Top news of the day to you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We're at the bench for another little teardown session, actually. We have us a nice little ms261. I built an alternate set of dogs for the thing since the stalker looked like, here it is, this right here, essentially somewhat about like that, I guess, if you get a close lineup on the bolt inside. So a little bit more aggressive, and we just did a little saw testing, and you notice how this thing is all high-end power, revs up really good actually, but it doesn't seem to have any low-end power, which they're kind of going that direction as a company at this point in time, I guess. It seems like we're going for a lot of high RPMs. Never mind the bench. For the fitting session, we were taking a look at putting a wrap handlebar on here, and so I kind of started that process. But the owner has I think it was his father-in-law or somebody owes him a solid, and he's going to have that process taken care of over there. So I'm going to get an alternate set of these and build a set just because I want to at this point, see how that transpires. But anyway, let's take a look under the hood here as we begin the saga. So they're running a little cartridge style quarter twist air cleaner, and it's similar to a 362, but I think it's a little bit smaller. I think maybe it's about the same size actually, looking at it. Standard baffle system on there. I'm going to have to be gathering up my tools here in this process to see, and this is the standard version, so it has an adjustable carburetor on it, but it doesn't have the Amtronic system whatsoever. The controller on those is a little bit different, although we are sporting the twin magnet system, so they're monitoring the speed of the crank that way, I would imagine. Standard baffle, kind of like what you see on the 362. Got a similar situation going on underneath here. Kind of interesting. I find things interesting. I think I probably say that a lot. I find things interesting in actuality. Because I do. Nothing special about that. Looks pretty standard. Has a similar throttle actuation rod that comes up. I kind of prefer the rod versus the cable on a personal level. If I was to be completely honest, I don't like the fly-by-wire situation because they stretch. But that's just me on a personal level. And so we're going to try not to wreck anything as we tear it apart here, because that'd be sad for me. It's interesting how they've gone to the different style with the cylinder cover on their designs. I'm not really sure why that is. Husqvarna has been doing that for eons and eons, and now Stihl is doing it. And we're going to have to take that loose down there, I think. Interesting. They don't give you much room to maneuver on this particular operation here, I'm noticing. Like no room at all. And since I don't get to see the service bulletin, I'm not exactly sure which way this goes for it to come off. But hopefully we'll figure it out here eventually. Huh. That's an interesting actuation system going on there. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Definitely not the KISS method of things. Definitely not the KISS method. So how about if we take the carburetor off and see what kind of maneuvering room we get. Technically, I don't need that to come off any further anyway. I don't actually need that thing. It's not in the way at this point. So I guess maybe we'll switch gears. And they have a big spark plug in there. That's kind of interesting. Why they have all their new saws designed with the small spark plug. I guess this design has been around for a little while. That's a process. Plastic. That's kind of interesting. Take the front of the carb box off, I guess. Slanted back cylinder design for sure. This is actually kind of cool the way that end of the handlebar just butts on the end of the tank instead of having to be shielded or supported or whatever you want to call it on some of the newer saws. 661, 362. But you got to take a lot more apart to get it off of there, I'm noticing at this point. Seems light though. Yeah, kind of not a fan of this operation whatsoever. The 460 044, 4 bolts off, handlebars fall off in your hands. That's a much better design. Let's not make things more complicated. Let's make things more simple, or not. Wow, super not impressed. And my bigger tine on the bigger dog is a problem. We're getting close. I guess we'll take the muffler off just for kicks here. Comes with the little shields, so you don't get stuff in the tube and start a fire. Kind of disappointed that the muffler's one piece though. This is supposed to be a pro saw. Not very tight, I will say that part. Does have the 4 bolts holding the muffler on, which is kind of nice. It's open inside, open cavity. Pretty choked down though with that exhaust, the way that gets involved in the process of getting out. We'll have to tune that up a little bit. So we can see the fuel line comes in, goes underneath. It has a lot of molded little areas for support. Standard issue ring that goes around the outside of the intake manifold. that's interesting. Okay, little mini cylinder. One thing that's really cool is how the intake is directed. It's down actually really steep, which is nice. Husqvarna has a tendency to go in like that and like that. This is actually more efficient. Husqvarna seem to have a little bit better cant on a lot of their saws on the exhaust coming down, which is actually better. So, as with all things, there are variances. I do apologize for that. Usually the intake manifold's held on with 4 bolts. With this little saw it's held on with 3. And I like the fact that they use little 4mm screws for this operation, bolts, whatever. Has a little molded piece there so you can't get it out of whack at all. And it's tiny. The air intake tract is tiny. The charge tract is tiny. So it goes from being pretty big as it comes through the carburetor, choked down pretty far as it dumps into the cylinder. That's kind of not fun. And so we've kind of taken it apart. Has a massive dead port in it underneath the ringland. If you can see that right there, it's huge. Find that to be kind of impressive. Similar to the 362 in the way it has a quad loop system feeding the cylinder. It looks like a carbon copy only baby to what we see in a 362 essentially. Interesting how they have a couple of ports going on though for the air circuit. So the pump's working off of this hole right here, and then there's another one right here that we can see. I think we can see it anyway. And my batteries are all dead on my... Well, maybe not. There's 2 holes in there. The upper left one is for the pulse circuit. The bottom one I'm not exactly positive, except it intersects with the raw air or the stratification air that goes in through the bottom here. That's kind of interesting, but standard quad loop system going in there. The ports don't have that funky shape in there like we see in some of the other ones though. They're pretty much flat looking elevation wise across the cylinder, so that's interesting. But little tiny lightweight cylinder, which is cool. They're keeping the weight down there. That could be the material itself. And again, dual magnet system going on the flywheel. Overall it's a relatively light little saw. You want to look at it, they say 50 cc's even. So I managed to come up with some AAA batteries for my trusty light. I thought maybe we'd take a look at the cylinder a little bit closer. I'm thinking that we can see the start on the back of the cylinder. The start of the intake circuit's the top one, half moon shape, very small. Actually gets kind of squarish shape as it dumps into the back of the cylinder. Standard stratification operation with the 2 ports coming in working with the reliefs in the back of the skirt, if we want to look at that. Piston for a minute, like I said, the dead ports right below the upper ringland, the lower ringland, technically, they're huge. They're actually huge. So, not really sure why they're massive in this little saw. There must be something going on with that. I'm not seeing any evidence. Well, we can see some evidence of ghosting happening right here already. This saw hasn't been run hardly at all. And you can see it's tight right here because we have a wear mark. And we can see that it's tight right there because we have a wear mark. And so, my guess is if we were to use a bore gauge, we'd find out this thing was out around a little bit, or tighter at least right through here, this part, which is why we see the line on the side of the cylinder. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But if we look at the transfer ports I was talking about, they're relatively flat, but we can see the back one's dumping in there. It's not twice as long as the front one, but it's half again as long maybe, or a third again as long. Looking down in there, they don't appear to be this shape. We mentioned that already, although it seems like maybe the back one's dropping off a little bit. So they're trying to direct the flow in there and help with the scavenging, I would imagine. Combustion chamber's relatively small. It's got kind of a step configuration going on in there. I'm hoping that you can see that. And if we look at the exhaust, we can see quite a bit of duration, but it's pretty narrow. There's a little reversion dam, it looks like, in there. I'd have to feel. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's about 1/8 of an inch ahead of the lip where the exhaust port on the top starts and goes out. There's actually a little reversion dam in there. Nothing on the bottom. I actually really appreciated the little insignia stamp going on in the front of the exhaust port. Well, technically, I guess the end of the exhaust port. And quite a bit more oblong shape than the standard box shape that they have in a lot of other saws. So I thought we'd take a little closer look once I queued up my light. And I did find out what was going on with this little spring thing right here. I thought that was kind of an interesting idea, but I'm not taking it apart any further because I don't need to, so there's no sense in it. And if we want to take a look in at the crankcase, it's again real similar to what we see in a 362 with the quad loop kind of concept working in conjunction with the shape on the bottom of the cylinder. And I thought that we had a nice size bearing actually in there. I kind of appreciate some of the bearing sizes that Stihl does. They're kind of on the big side. This one comes in at 78. So the needle bearing itself appears to be the same size as what we see in some of the little bit bigger saws. And it's in a little machine, which I can appreciate that actually. So anyway, I thought we'd just throw that out, throw that in for just the whole concept of a little bit more information. So there you go. We'll have to put the hurt on this thing and get it queued up and get going against that 346 again and see if we can get any power out of this thing. So thanks for watching this session. Have a blessed day wherever you might be on God's green earth.